Hey guys, tonight we slip into the hazy, ancient world of cannabis, where wisps of smoke curl through time, carrying secrets from forgotten firesides. Picture yourself crouched in a dimly lit cave, the air thick with earthy scents as someone tosses dried leaves onto glowing embers. You're not just inhaling history, you're breathing the dawn of human curiosity about this peculiar plant. Fair warning, unraveling 10,000 years of weed story might just lull you into a trance. You probably won't survive this level of cozy. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start in the misty hills of Central Asia, around 8000 BCE, where the cannabis plant first whispers its presence. Archaeologists have unearthed clues, charred seeds, fragments of hemp rope, and ancient campsites scattered across modern-day China and Siberia. These aren't just random weeds, they're cannabis sativa, a scrappy survivor thriving in the wild. You imagine nomadic tribes stumbling upon these plants, their spiky leaves glinting under a prehistoric sun. Maybe they chewed the seeds for a quick snack or wove the stalks into sturdy cords. But here's the kicker. Some of those seeds, found in a Yonghai tomb in China's Xinjiang region, date to 2500 BCE and tested positive for THC, the stuff that makes you giggle at bad cave paintings. These folks weren't just making rope, they were catching a vibe. You picture a cold night, stars piercing the sky like tiny spears. A hunter tosses cannabis seeds onto a fire and the smoke swirls, sharp and herbal. Did they notice the buzz? Historians still argue whether these early humans used cannabis for food, fiber, or a fuzzy-headed escape. The mainstream fact is clear. Cannabis seeds and fibers appear in Neolithic sites across Asia, proving its utility. But the quirky tidbit. Some researchers suggest those tomb seeds were part of a burial ritual, maybe to send the dead off with a cosmic high. You can almost see it. A grieving family passing around a smoldering bundle, their eyes glassy as they bid farewell. Now you're trudging through the Eurasian steppe, where cannabis grows wild, its roots deep in the soil of human survival. By 5000 BCE, tribes are weaving hemp into nets to catch fish or twisting it into clothes that don't fall apart during a mammoth hunt. The plant's versatility is unmatched, seeds for nutrition, stalks for strength. But let's not romanticize it too much. These people aren't hosting prehistoric pot parties. Or are they? A few rogue scholars point to pollen traces in ancient fire pits, hinting at intentional burning. Maybe someone noticed the smoke made them feel lighter, like their soul was doing a little dance. You smirk, imagining a shaman accidentally inventing the first blunt while trying to fix a headache. As you wander further, you hit the Bronze Age around 3000 BCE. Cannabis is no longer a wild weed, it's cultivated. In ancient China, farmers are growing it alongside millet and rice. You see them hands calloused, tending rows of green under a relentless sun. The Shenong Benqiaojing, a legendary Chinese text from later centuries, calls cannabis ma, praising it for balancing the body's energies. But here's the catch. Ma also means chaos, a nod to its mind-bending side. You chuckle, thinking of a farmer warning his kid, don't eat too many of those seeds or you'll be chasing invisible dragons. That duality, practical and psychedelic, sets cannabis apart. It's not just a crop, it's a mystery wrapped in leaves. You pause by a riverbank, where a woman pounds hemp fibers into thread. Her hands move rhythmically and you wonder if she knows the plant's other secrets. The mainstream story says hemp was a staple for textiles and food, with sites like Bampo in China showing hemp seeds in storage jars. But the quirky bit, some graves from this era contain cannabis flowers, not just seeds tucked beside the dead. Were they offerings for the afterlife or just someone's stash? Historians still argue whether these burials signal spiritual use or just practical packing for the great beyond. You picture a mourner whispering, "Take this, it'll make eternity more chill." By now, you're deep in the steppe's vastness, where trade routes are forming like veins across the earth. Cannabis seeds travel with nomads, spreading west toward the Caucasus and south toward India. You imagine merchants bartering hemp ropes for shiny obsidian, unaware they're carrying a plant that'll shape cultures for millennia. The smoke from their campfires carries a faint, familiar scent, and you wonder who first leaned in, took a deep breath, and thought, this is the good stuff. That's the spark, curiosity meeting chemistry, that lights the path forward. You're not done yet. The plant's journey is just beginning, and you're along for the ride, following its roots through time. From these ancient hills, cannabis starts creeping into rituals, medicines, and maybe a few bad decisions. You grin, thinking of that one nomad who overdid it and tried to befriend a wolf. The story's unfolding, and you're sinking deeper into its haze, ready to see where it leads next. You drift from those ancient hillsides now, where the smoke still lingers in your nostrils, into shadowed groves where the air hums with chants and the flicker of firelight dances on painted faces. Remember those charred seeds from the tombs? They're not just relics, they're invitations to something deeper, a bridge to the spirit world that shamans crossed with careful steps. You find yourself huddled in a yurt on the Siberian plains, around 2000 BCE, the wind whispering through felt walls as a figure draped in animal skins stirs a brew. This is where cannabis steps from the mundane into the mystical, woven into rituals that blur the line between earth and ether. You watch as the shaman, eyes sharp like a hawk's, crushes dried cannabis leaves into a stone bowl, mixing them with milk or honey to create a potent elixir. The mainstream historical fact here is that Scythian nomads, those fierce horse riders of the steppes, used cannabis in sweat lodges as described by the Greek historian Herodotus in the 5th century BCE. He noted how they inhaled vapors from hot stones sprinkled with hemp seeds, howling with delight. You can almost feel the heat rising, the steam thick and heady wrapping around you like a warm blanket. It's not just smoke, it's a portal pulling visions from the depths of the mind. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some shamans might have burned cannabis alongside other herbs like ephedra, creating a cocktail that sent them soaring. Imagine one overzealous practitioner mistaking a vision for reality and trying to ride an invisible horse. Talk about a wild ride without the saddle. You chuckle softly, the sound echoing in your cozy room as you picture the confusion the next morning. These rituals weren't parties, they were serious business, seeking guidance from ancestors or gods for hunts, heals, or harvests. You lean closer to the fire now, the shaman's drum beating a steady rhythm that matches your slowing heartbeat. In these ceremonies, cannabis isn't recreational, it's reverential. You inhale deeply, the scent earthy and resinous, feeling your thoughts loosen like untied knots. Historians still argue whether these early uses were purely entheogenic, meant to induce divine encounters, or if they started as simple pain relief that evolved into something sacred. Did the buzz come first, or the belief? It's a chicken and egg debate that keeps scholars up at night while you're here drifting off. As the night deepens, you follow the shaman into a trance, colors swirling in your mind's eye, greens of the plant, blues of the sky. The plant's psychoactive properties, that THC we mentioned earlier, amplify the senses, making every rustle a message, every shadow a spirit. You imagine tribes gathering under the full moon, passing a pipe carved from bone, each puff a prayer. It's intimate, communal, a way to connect beyond words. And let's not forget the gentle sarcasm in this. While modern folks chase highs at concerts, these ancients were basically hosting the original Burning Man, minus the neon lights and overpriced tickets. You sink deeper, the narrative pulling you like a gentle current. The shaman's voice rises, chanting in a tongue long lost, invoking visions of eagles soaring or rivers flowing backward. Cannabis in this role becomes a key to unlock hidden realms, helping healers diagnose illnesses or foresee dangers. You feel a tingle as if the smoke is seeping through time, relaxing your muscles one by one. Remember that nomad who befriended a wolf? Maybe it was a shamanic vision gone sideways, a lesson in moderation whispered through the ages. Now you're wandering with these nomads as they migrate, carrying cannabis seeds in pouches, spreading the practice like wildfire. In burial mounds across the Altai Mountains, archaeologists find braziers with cannabis residues, proof of its ritual importance. You picture the scene, a circle of elders, faces illuminated by embers, sharing stories amplified by the herb's embrace. It's not about escape, it's about enhancement, making the ordinary extraordinary. And here's a light joke for you. If coffee is the modern shaman's brew for productivity, cannabis was the ancient one's for profundity, though it might explain why some cave art looks like abstract doodles. You breathe out slowly, the room around you fatting as the step expands. These rituals evolve, blending with local beliefs, perhaps mixed with mushrooms in some spots or fermented drinks in others. The quirky fringe, some theories suggest shamans used cannabis to shapeshift, believing it let them borrow animal forms for journeys. Imagine turning into a deer mid-ritual, no wonder they howled. Historians still argue whether such accounts are literal or metaphorical, a poetic way to describe altered states. As you linger in this smoky haze, the shaman's fire dims, but the visions linger, soft and soothing. The plant's role in spirituality is cemented here, a thread weaving through cultures yet to come. You're easing further, the weight of history light on your eyelids, ready for the next whisper of the wind. The wind carries you southward now, away from those steppe fires where visions danced like fireflies, toward the lush valleys and sacred rivers of ancient India, where cannabis finds a new home in the heart of spirituality and daily life. Remember how the shamans used it to unlock hidden realms? Here it blooms into something even more profound, entwined with gods and gurus under the tropical sun. You glide along trade caravans snaking through mountain passes around 1500 BCE as nomads bring seeds from the north, planting them in fertile soil that drinks deep from monsoon rains. You arrive amid the Vedic period where hymns echo across the Indus Valley, praising the plant known as Bang or Vijaya, meaning victory. The mainstream historical fact is that the Rigveda, one of the oldest sacred texts, mentions cannabis as one of 5 sacred plants, used in rituals to invoke divine favor and ward off evil. You can feel the humidity clinging to your skin as priests mix it into soma, a mysterious elixir that might have included cannabis alongside other herbs, sipped during ceremonies to commune with deities like Indra. The air is alive with incense and chants, the plant's leaves ground into pastes or infused in milk, creating a gentle euphoria that sharpens the mind for meditation. But here's the quirky tidbit. In some fringe accounts, ancient yogis would hang upside down from trees while smoking cannabis through clay pipes, believing it helped them achieve enlightenment faster. Talk about getting a head rush in more ways than one. You smile faintly, imagining a sage dangling like a bat, puffing away and muttering profound truths to squirrels. These practices aren't just folklore. They hint at cannabis's role in pushing boundaries, blending the physical with the ethereal in ways that make modern yoga classes seem tame. You wander through bustling villages now, where farmers cultivate cannabis alongside rice paddies, its tall stalks swaying like guardians. The Atharvaveda, another Vedic text, listed as a remedy for fever, dysentery, and even to release us from anxiety, a nod to its medicinal prowess. You picture a healer crushing leaves into a poultice, applying it to a weary traveler's brow, the cool relief spreading like a whisper. And let's add a dash of gentle sarcasm. While today's wellness influencers tout CBD oils for stress, these ancients were basically the original chill pill pioneers without the fancy packaging or inflated prices. As you sink deeper into this verdant landscape, the Ganges murmurs nearby, its waters reflecting flickering oil lamps from evening rituals. Cannabis becomes integral to festivals like Holi, where Bang Lassi, a creamy drink laced with the herb, flows freely, coloring celebrations with laughter and lightheaded joy. You taste it on your tongue, sweet and nutty, a far cry from the shamanic vapors but carrying that same thread of connection. Historians still argue whether its use in Vedic times was strictly ritualistic, or if recreational enjoyment sneaked in during off-hours, a debate that mirrors our modern tug-of-war between medicine and merriment. You pause under a banyan tree, its roots twisting like ancient veins, as sadhus, holy wanderers, share a chillum pipe filled with charas, hand-rolled resin. The smoke curls lazily, carrying stories of Shiva, the god said to favor cannabis for its mind-expanding gifts. Legend has it he retreated to the Himalayas, surviving on the plant alone, emerging wiser. You chuckle softly. If that's true, maybe Shiva was the first to discover munchies, craving cosmic snacks after a long session. These tales weave cannabis into the fabric of devotion, not as a vice but a vehicle for transcendence. Further along, you encounter Ayurvedic texts from around 1000 BCE, systematizing cannabis as ganja for treating insomnia, pain, and digestive woes. Doctors prescribe it in measured doses, balancing doshas with herbal wisdom. The quirky fringe, some believe it was used in tantric practices to heighten sensory awareness, turning ordinary moments into symphonies of sensation, though nothing too steamy for our PG-13 vibe. You feel the warmth of the sun on your back, the narrative lulling you like a soft hammock swing. Callbacks pull you gently. Those Scythian howls echo faintly in the Vedic chants, a reminder of how migration marries traditions. And for another light joke, consider this. If shamans were the DJs of ancient rituals, Vedic priests were the remix artists, turning smoke into soma symphonies. You're drifting now, the sense of spice and herb mingling as cannabis solidifies its place not just as a plant, but a partner in the human quest for peace. The journey presses on, the rivers flowing westward, carrying seeds and secrets to new horizons, your eyelids growing heavier with each whispered fact. You meander westward from those sacred Indian rivers, where Bang's sweetness still lingers on your lips like a forgotten melody, into broader landscapes where cannabis splits its identity, revealing a practical side that rivals its dreamy allure. Remember how the Vedas praised it as a sacred ally. Now it shows its workhorse nature, diverging into strains that build empires rather than just bend minds. You step into the cradle of early civilizations around 3000 BCE, from Mesopotamia's sun-baked plains to the Nile's fertile banks, where the plant's dual personality emerges, industrial hemp for ropes and sails versus the psychoactive kind that whispers secrets in the smoke. You begin by sorting through the leaves, so to speak, distinguishing hemp from its headier cousin. The mainstream historical fact is that hemp, the non-psychoactive variety low in THC but high in fiber, became a cornerstone for ancient economies, with evidence from Chinese texts like the Zia Zhao Zheng describing its cultivation for textiles as early as the Zhou dynasty. You imagine farmers in the Yellow River Valley, backs bent under the sun, harvesting tall stalks that twist into cords strong enough to haul boulders or rig boats across churning waters. It's utilitarian, no frills, just a plant pulling its weight in a world building pyramids and palaces. But here's the quirky tidbit. In some early Mesopotamian sites, archaeologists found hemp seeds mixed with sesame in storage pits, suggesting it was a snack staple. Though one fringe theory claims Sumerians used fermented hemp beer for mild buzzes during ziggurat festivals, picture a tipsy priest spilling offerings and blaming the gods. You grin lazily, the image tickling your thoughts as you wander these dusty fields. Hemp's fibers are the star here, woven into everything from sails for Phoenician traders to bowstrings for archers. And with a touch of gentle sarcasm, while the psychoactive stuff might make you ponder life's mysteries, hemp just helps you tie them up neatly like the original duct tape of antiquity. You delve deeper, comparing the two paths cannabis takes. Psychoactive varieties rich in cannabinoids thrive in warmer climates, their resinous buds sought for medicine or mysticism, as we've seen in rituals. Hemp, cooler climate hardy, grows straight and fibrous, low on the fun chemicals but high on utility. Historians still argue whether early farmers intentionally bred these distinctions or if nature sorted them through geography. Did selective planting create the split, or was it just lucky adaptation? You picture a Babylonian merchant haggling over bundles. This one's for your ship, that one's for your shaman, don't mix 'em up or you'll sail in circles. As you stroll through ancient markets, the air buzzing with barters, hemp ropes coil like serpents at your feet, essential for rigging Egyptian barges down the Nile. The Ebers papyrus from around 1550 BCE nods to cannabis, but it's the fiber form that's king, used in mummy wrappings for eternity's embrace. You feel the rough texture under your fingers, sturdy and unyielding. Meanwhile, in cooler European fringes, Celtic tribes might have grown hemp for clothing, its seeds oiling lamps that flicker through long winters. The quirky fringe? Some believe Scythians, those nomads we recalled earlier, carried both types, psychoactive for ceremonies, hemp for horse tack, making them the ultimate multitaskers of the steppe. You pause amid olive groves in ancient Greece where the divide sharpens. Hemp arrives via trade, its fibers crafting nets for fishermen hauling in the Aegean bounty. But the high-inducing kind, it's rarer, whispered in tales of exotic imports. You chuckle. If hemp was the reliable sibling building civilizations, the psychoactive one was the rebellious artist, showing up uninvited to spice things up. Callbacks weave in, those Vedic drinks echo in Greek symposia, where diluted cannabis wine might have loosened tongues, though evidence is slim. Further on you reach Roman fields, where agronomists like Columella detail hemp cultivation in treatises, praising its soil-enriching roots. It's farmed systematically, rotations with grains yielding canvas for legions' tents. The psychoactive variant lurks in medical lore with Dioscorides nodding cannabis for earaches, but it's the fiber that fuels expansion. And for a light joke, Romans conquered the world on hemp sails, imagine if they'd smoked it instead. The empire might have chilled out sooner. You sink into this duality, the narrative cradling you like soft linens, weight, probably hemp ones. In early civilizations, this split allows cannabis to infiltrate every layer, practical for the masses, profound for the priests. The wind down begins subtly, but we're not there yet. Your journey through strains continues, eyelids fluttering with each fact. You cross sun-scorched sands now, leaving behind those Roman fields where hemp tents sheltered legions and psychoactive whispers hinted at hidden remedies, arriving at the Nile's life-giving banks where cannabis encounters a civilization obsessed with eternity and elixirs. Remember that split between fiber and fervor. In Egypt, it leans toward healing, scripted on papyrus scrolls that crinkle like autumn leaves under your imagined touch. You glide along the river's edge around 2000 BCE, palms swaying overhead as scribes etch knowledge into reeds, capturing the plant's secrets amid gods and glyphs. You delve into the Ebers papyrus, a medical compendium from about 1550 BCE, where cannabis appears as shemshemet, prescribed for inflammation and eye ailments. The mainstream historical fact is that this ancient document, one of the oldest medical texts, lists cannabis-infused remedies, like mixing it with honey to soothe sore eyes or ease childbirth pains. You picture a physician in a linen kilt, grinding green leaves into a paste under the shade of a sycamore, the mixture sticky and aromatic, applied gently to a patient's brow. The Nile murmurs nearby, crocodiles lurking like lazy guardians as the herb's compounds work their quiet magic, reducing swelling in a world without aspirin. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some fringe interpretations suggest Egyptians used cannabis in mummification, perhaps soaking bandages in resin to preserve bodies or ward off insects. Imagine a pharaoh's eternal rest scented like a forgotten herb garden, bugs buzzing away in defeat. You smirk drowsily, the thought amusing as you wander these temple corridors lit by flickering torches. It's not confirmed, but it adds a layer of intrigue, blending the practical with the preserved, much like how modern folks stash snacks in sarcophagi-shaped coolers for laughs. You linger in the healer's chamber, incense curling lazily mingling with the sharp tang of crushed cannabis. Priests double as doctors here, invoking Thoth for wisdom as they brew potions. You feel the cool stone floor underfoot, the air heavy with myrrh and mystery. And with a gentle, sarcastic aside, while today's pharmacies hawk gummies for every gripe, these Egyptians were the OG apothecaries, doling out weed wraps without a prescription pad or waiting line. As you explore further, the Kahun papyrus from around 1850 BCE hints at gynecological uses, cannabis suppositories for women's health, innovative if a bit invasive by modern standards. The plant arrives via trade from the Levant, its seeds bartered for gold or grain, integrating into a pharmacopoeia rich with aloe and opium. Historians still argue whether its use was widespread or reserved for elites, a debate fueled by sparse artifacts versus textual boasts. Did every village healer stock it, or was it a pyramid perk for pharaohs? You drift through bustling markets, merchants hawking bundles of SMSMT, the air alive with haggling and the scent of spices. Hemp fibers from cannabis weave into sails for feluccas gliding the Nile, echoing that duality we touched on earlier. But here the focus shifts to medicine, vapors inhaled for headaches or teas steeped for tranquility. You chuckle softly. If Cleopatra had a secret to her allure, maybe it was a cannabis facial, smoother skin and a serene smile, no Botox needed. Callbacks pull you gently. Those Vedic pastes find parallels in Egyptian ointments, a cross-cultural nod to the plant's versatility. And for another light joke, consider the scribes jotting remedies, one slip of the reed pen and suddenly cannabis cures eternal boredom instead of boils. You're easing deeper, the narrative like a soft current, carrying you past obelisks etched with eternal tales. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows over reed beds where cannabis might have grown wild, adapted to the delta's damp. In rituals it aids embalmers, perhaps fumigated to purify air thick with natron salts. The quirky fringe expands. Some speculate it featured in Osiris myths, symbolizing resurrection through its regenerative growth, dying back in dry seasons, blooming anew with floods. You feel the rhythm of the river, steady and soothing, as facts fade into folklore. You pause at a temple wall, hieroglyphs dancing in torchlight depicting healers with herb bundles. The Berlin papyrus echoes similar uses, for wounds and worms, cannabis compounded with fats for salves. It's holistic, balancing body and the soul in a worldview where health harmonizes with the heavens. And one more joke to lighten the haze. Egyptians invented the pyramid scheme for eternity, but cannabis, that was their level up for living well before the afterlife party. The sands shift under you, the story unfolding like unraveling linen, drawing you toward horizons where the plant sails further, your breath slowing in sync with the Nile's flow. You sail across the Mediterranean now, the Nile's fertile whispers fatting into the salty breeze of azure waves, where cannabis washes ashore in the lands of olive groves and marble columns, viewed through the keen eyes of philosophers and healers who ponder its place in the cosmos. Remember those Egyptian salves, sticky with resin. They travel with merchants to Greece and Rome, evolving from exotic import to subjective scrutiny and sometimes skepticism. You stand on the Acropolis around 500 BCE, the Parthenon rising like a dream in stone, as thinkers debate the herb's virtues amid symposia flowing with wine. But wait, is that a hint of something greener in the air? You begin with Herodotus, the father of history, who in his histories describes Scythian vapor baths with cannabis, those steppe nomads tossing seeds on hot stones to induce ecstatic howls. The mainstream historical fact is that Greek physicians like Dioscorides in his 1st century CE de Materia Medica cataloged cannabis as cannabis ameros, recommending it for earaches and inflammation, bold roots for joint pain, or infused in wine for digestive relief. You imagine a Hellenistic doctor in a chiton, mortar, and pestle in hand, pounding leaves into a poultice under the shade of a cypress tree, the mixture earthy and pungent, applied to a wrestler's swollen knee after a grueling pancration match. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some fringe sources suggest Aristophanes, the comic playwright, might have poked fun at cannabis in lost works, imagining it as a muse for absurd plots, like a character getting so high they argue with clouds, predating stoner comedies by millennia. You chuckle quietly, picturing Athenian audiences roaring with laughter, the herb's effects exaggerated for satire in a theater echoing with olive branch rustles. It's speculative, but it paints cannabis not just as medicine, but a spark for the absurd in a culture that prized wit. You wander the agora now, philosophers packing amid stalls of figs and pottery, discoursing on the soul while perhaps sampling imported remedies. Plato in his ideal republic might have frowned on mind-altering substances, grouping them with excesses that disrupt harmony, though he doesn't name cannabis directly. You feel the sun-warmed marble underfoot, the air buzzing with ideas as Socrates questions a herbalist. Does this plant elevate the mind or ensnare it? And with a gentle, sarcastic nudge, While modern folks debate edibles for enlightenment, these Greeks were basically beta-testing philosophy highs without the munchies disclaimer. As you delve into Roman times, the empire expands, pulling cannabis further into its pharmacopoeia. Galen, the 2nd century physician to emperors, echoes Dioscorides, using it for pain and even veterinary care, treating gladiators' wounds or chariot horses' strains. The plant arrives via conquests in the east, seeds tucked in legionaries' packs, grown in villa gardens alongside basil and thyme. Historians still argue whether Greeks and Romans distinguished its intoxicating effects clearly, or if recreational use hid behind medical pretexts. A timeless gray area, much like today's medicinal brownies that mysteriously vanish during movie nights. You pause in a Roman bathhouse, steam rising like veils where vapors might include cannabis-infused oils for relaxation. Pliny the Elder in his Natural History warns of overindulgence causing impotence, a cautionary tale woven with admiration for its seed's nutritional value. You taste the irony, an empire built on excess yet advising moderation with this humble herb. Callbacks linger, those Vedic elixirs find kin in Roman tinctures, a thread of continuity across seas. And for a light joke, if Julius Caesar had toked before crossing the Rubicon, maybe he'd have pondered, ale or high, that is the question. Further afield, you encounter Celsus, whose De Medicina prescribes cannabis for stones in the bladder, boiled in water for baths. It's systematic, empirical, blending observation with lore from conquered lands. The quirky fringe expands. Some believe Nero's fiddling during Rome's fire was metaphorically high on exotic imports, though that's pure whimsy, no evidence, just a fun twist on history's villains. You feel the narrative's rhythm, slow and soothing like waves lapping Aegean shores. In symposiums, diluted cannabis wine might loosen tongues for poetry recitals, Horace or Virgil drawing inspiration from its subtle lift. The plant's duality shines, fiber for sails powering triremes, buds for balms healing sailors' scurvy. And another joke to ease you, Greeks invented democracy, but if they'd voted on cannabis, it might have passed unanimously after a very relaxed debate. You drift through forums alive with oratory, the herb a quiet companion in a loud world. Seneca might have seen it as a stoic tool for enduring pain, aligning with endurance over escape. The views evolve from curiosity to caution, setting stages for medieval shifts. Your thoughts soften, the story cradling you toward slumber's edge. You venture eastward once more, the Mediterranean's salty tang giving way to the arid spice of desert winds, where cannabis transforms under the crescent moon of medieval Islamic lands, embracing new names and nuances amid caliphates and caravans. Remember those Roman physicians brewing tinctures for emperors? Their knowledge flows along Silk Road trails, mingling with Arabian ingenuity to birth hashish and hazy mystiques. You tread softly through Baghdad's bustling souks around 800 CE, lanterns casting golden glows on merchant stalls, the air thick with frankincense and the subtle resin of something more intoxicating. You start with the arrival of cannabis in the Islamic Golden Age, known as kinab or banj, imported from India and Persia. Its uses documented in medical tomes that rival any library of Alexandria. The mainstream historical fact is that Avicenna, the polymath physician in his 11th century canon of medicine, prescribes cannabis for headaches, epilepsy, and as a diuretic, integrating it into a holistic system balancing humors with herbal precision. You envision a scholar in flowing robes, quills scratching parchment by candlelight, detailing infusions of hashish, concentrated resin, for pain relief. The mixture simmered gently over a brazier, its vapors rising like scholarly sighs. But here's the quirky tidbit. In some lesser-known tales from the era, assassins under Hassan I Saba, the old man of the mountain, allegedly used hashish to induce loyalty and fearlessness, giving rise to the word hashishin. Though modern scholars debunk it as myth, it's a fringe legend that paints cannabis as a tool for shadowy intrigue, like a medieval mind control potion gone rogue. You smile faintly, imagining a fortified mountain lair where recruits puff away doubts, emerging as stealthy specters talk about high-stakes motivation. You weave through narrow alleys now, where apothecaries grind resin into pills or mix it with honey for electuaries, sweet treats that mask the bitterness while delivering calm. The Quran doesn't explicitly ban cannabis, unlike alcohol, so it flourishes in moderation, a gray area navigated by jurists. You feel the cool tile of a mosque courtyard underfoot, imams debating its permissibility as Sufis nearby seek divine union through whirling dances enhanced by subtle intakes. And with a gentle, sarcastic whisper, while Europe's dark ages fumbled in shadows, these scholars were literally cataloging stars and serums with cannabis as a quiet companion. As you immerse in this era, the tales of the Arabian Nights flicker to life, Scheherazade's stories perhaps inspired by hashish-fueled reveries, genies emerging from smoke like metaphorical highs. Al-Razi, another medical giant, warns of overuse leading to lethargy, a balanced view echoed in pharmacies from Cordoba to Cairo. Historians still argue whether its spread was driven more by medicine or mysticism, a tug between empirical healing and ecstatic escape. Did doctors lead the charge, or did dervishes dance it into popularity? You linger in a Sufi lodge, the zikr chants rhythmic and repetitive, cannabis sometimes smoked in pipes to deepen meditation, dissolving the ego in divine love. Rumi, the poet mystic, might allude to it metaphorically in verses about intoxication without wine, seeking the beloved through altered states. You breathe in the essence, resinous and warm, your own thoughts softening like wax in heat. Callbacks echo. Those Greek wines find kin in Arabic sherbets laced with bang, cross-cultural sips spanning empires. And for a light joke, if Avicenna had patented his remedies, he'd be the Bezos of balms with hashish as his prime delivery. Further into the night, you encounter hashish eaters in coffee houses, precursors to cafes, where stories unfold over kawa and cat, cannabis adding layers to lively debates. The plant's resin, harvested by running through fields in leather aprons to collect sticky pollen, becomes a commodity traded alongside silk and spices. The quirky fringe deepens. Some believe Mamluk warriors used it for courage before battles. A natural adrenaline sands the crash. Imagine charging into fray with a serene smile, foes baffled by the blissed-out brigade. You drift through Persian gardens, fountains tinkling like soft laughter where poets like Hafiz pen odes that hint at herbal inspirations, wine often a code for deeper indulgences. In medical schools of Gundishapur, students learn to dose carefully, avoiding the pitfalls Pliny cautioned centuries ago. And another joke to lull you, Islamic scholars mapped the heavens while high. No wonder they discovered so many stars, they were probably seeing double. The era's tolerance allows innovation, cannabis in surgeries as anesthetic or post-op calm, a mercy in a time of crude tools. From Damascus to Delhi it adapts, Sufis using it in Sama gatherings to transcend, whirls blurring into oneness. You feel the spin gently, the narrative wrapping you in its folds, history's haze thickening as eyelids droop. You slip away from the flickering lanterns of Baghdad's souks, where hashish sweeten tales and soothe scholars, crossing seas and centuries to land in medieval Europe, where cannabis arrives like an exotic stranger, both welcomed and eyed with suspicion. Those Arabian elixirs, remember their honey tang? They trickle into ports like Venice and Lisbon via trade routes, carried by merchants whose ships creak under cargoes of spice and secrets. You stand on a cobblestone quay around 1200 CE, the air sharp with salt and skepticism, as Europe grapples with this plant from distant lands, weaving it into fields and folklore under a gray, church-dominated sky. You begin at the docks, where hemp cannabis's sturdy sibling reigns supreme. The mainstream historical fact is that by the 13th century, hemp is a vital crop across Europe. Its fibers spun into ropes for galleys and sails for explorers like Marco Polo, who likely saw it growing along his Silk Road journeys. You picture Italian sailors knotting coarse hemp cords, their hands rough as the waves they'll conquer, crafting nets to haul fish or rigging to chase horizons. The plant's practical side thrives here, sown in fields from France to Flanders, its seeds pressed for oil to light lamps in drafty castles. But here, the quirky tidbit. Some fringe accounts claim medieval alchemists, those proto-chemists chasing elixirs of life, experimented with cannabis resin in their bubbling alembics, hoping to distill wisdom or at least a decent buzz. Imagine a robed figure muttering Latin, accidentally inventing the first hemp tincture while aiming for gold. You smile, the image soft in your mind as you wander muddy lanes, the scent of hay and hearth smoke mixing with distant dreams of Arabian Nights. It's not mainstream, but it hints at curiosity bubbling beneath Europe's rigid surface. You tread through monastic gardens now, where monks cultivate hemp alongside lavender, their vows of silence unbroken as they weave it into sackcloth for penance or candles for vespers. The church looms large, its edicts shaping what's permissible, yet cannabis slips through cracks, less as medicine, more as utility. You feel the damp chill of a cloister, the rustle of parchment as herbalists like Hildegard of Bingen note its uses, though cautiously, for stomach aches or wounds. And with a gentle, sarcastic nudge, while modern stoners chase strains for euphoria, these monks were just trying to keep their ships afloat and their souls pure. Cannabis was their humble helper, not a ticket to transcendence. As you delve deeper, trade with the Islamic world brings whispers of hashish, but it's rare, costly, and cloaked in mystery. In Spain under Muslim rule, physicians like Maimonides echo Avicenna, prescribing it for pain, but in Christian Europe, it's hemp that dominates, grown under royal decrees to supply navvies. Historians still argue whether psychoactive cannabis was used medicinally or recreationally in secret. Did apothecaries sneak it into tonics, or was it too foreign to trust? The debate lingers like smoke in a tavern's dim corner where travelers swap tales of eastern herbs over ale. You pause in a bustling port, crates of hemp unloading beside amphorae of wine. The Renaissance dawns, and explorers like Columbus will soon rely on hemp sales to reach new worlds, the plant's fibers binding their ambitions. Callbacks weave in, those Nile sails find echoes here, tying continents together. And for a light joke, if medieval Europe had legalized hashish, maybe the Crusades would have been less sword, more sitar. Imagine knights trading lances for lutes in a haze of peace. Further along, you encounter early herbals like the 15th century Hortus sanitatis, listing cannabis for epilepsy or insomnia, though warnings of dulling the senses persist. It's imported sparingly, its resin a luxury for the wealthy or the wildly curious. The quirky fringe deepens. Some believe witches, those scapegoats of fear, used cannabis in flying ointments to induce visions, less soaring on broomsticks, more drifting in dreams. You feel the narrative's pull, soft as a woolen cloak wrapping you in history's folds. In market towns, hemp seeds feed peasants, their nutty crunch a staple in lean winters while fibers clothe them against the cold. The psychoactive side remains elusive, whispered in alchemical circles or among sailors who have tasted Bang in Moorish ports. And another joke to ease you, medieval farmers grew hemp for profit, but if they'd smoked it, their fields might have sprouted poetry instead of rope. Chaucer could have had a field day. You linger in a candlelit scriptorium, quills scratching as knowledge spreads. Cannabis, still a dual force, bridges the practical and the profound, though Europe leans hard on the former. The age of exploration looms, and hemp will sail further, your thoughts softening like twilight, the story's rhythm lulling you toward distant shores. You sail across the Atlantic now, leaving behind Europe's cobblestone ports where hemp ropes tethered dreams of conquest, landing in the Americas where cannabis finds fresh soil and new stories under vast uncharted skies. Those sturdy sails remember their taut strength. They carry the plant to the New World where it takes root in colonial fields and indigenous traditions, weaving a tapestry of utility and ritual as empires clash and cultures blend. You stand on a Virginia plantation around 1600 CE, the air humid with promise, tobacco leaves rustling nearby as hemp stakes its claim in a land of reinvention. You begin with the colonial push for hemp, driven by European hunger for maritime power. The mainstream historical fact is that early American colonies like Jamestown were mandated by British decrees to grow hemp for ropes and sails, critical for the Royal Navy's dominance. You picture settlers, weary from sea voyages, sowing seeds in loamy soil, their hands calloused as they cultivate fields under a relentless sun. Hemp becomes a cash crop, its fibers spun into canvas for ships or clothing for pioneers, a lifeline tying the colonies to the Old World's ambitions. The scent of fresh-cut stalks fills your nostrils, earthy and practical, grounding you in this frontier. But here, the quirky tidbit. Some fringe accounts suggest certain Native American tribes, particularly in Central and South America, used psychoactive cannabis long before Columbus, possibly introduced via ancient trade routes or local wild strains. Imagine a shaman in the Andes puffing a pipe under starlit peaks, centuries before hemp fields sprouted in Virginia. You smile drowsily, picturing a pre-Columbian smoke signal that doubled as a spiritual hotline, though evidence is thin and speculative, a whisper in the archaeological haze. You wander through colonial settlements now, log cabins dotting the landscape, where hemp is currency, literally in some places accepted as tax payment. Farmers like George Washington cultivate it, his diaries knotting crop rotations with meticulous care. You feel the rough texture of homespun hemp shirts durable against brambles as women spin fibers by hearthlight. And with a gentle, sarcastic nudge, while today's hipsters chase artisanal CBD lattes, these colonists were just trying to keep their ships afloat and their taxes paid. Cannabis was their colonial side hustle, no Instagram needed. As you delve deeper, you encounter indigenous uses, less documented but vibrant in oral traditions. Tribes like the Aztecs or Maya in regions where cannabis might have grown wild, possibly used it in rituals much like their northern cousins burned sage. The Spanish, arriving with hemp for their galleons, note its medicinal use in Mesoamerica, perhaps for fevers or pain, echoing Egyptian papyri across oceans. Historians still argue whether these native practices predate European contact or if cannabis arrived solely with conquerors, a debate tangled in lost records and colonial bias. Did the plant sail with Cortés, or was it already dancing in local fires? You pause in a Caribbean port where hemp rigs pirate ships and merchant vessels alike, the plant's fibers binding empires and outlaws. Callbacks weave in. Those Nile sails and Roman nets find echoes in Caribbean canvas, a thread of utility spanning continents. And for a light joke, if pirates had smoked their hemp instead of weaving it, maybe they'd have sung shanties about mermaids instead of plundering them. Less gold, more giggles. Further along, you find cannabis in colonial medicine, apothecaries brewing teas for rheumatism or insomnia, following European herbals. The psychoactive side is rare, overshadowed by hemp's economic might, but sailors returning from India whisper of Bang's effects, planting seeds of curiosity. The quirky fringe deepens. Some speculate enslaved Africans brought knowledge of cannabis from their homelands, using it in secretive rituals to ease the pain of bondage. Though records are scarce, it's a haunting possibility that adds depth to the plant's story. You drift through tobacco fields where hemp grows alongside, its seeds crushed for oil or eaten as gruel by laborers. The colonies thrive on this crop, exporting bales to England, fueling wars and wealth. And another joke to lull you: colonists grew hemp for freedom's ships, but if they'd tried the other kind, maybe the Boston Tea Party would have been a chill potluck instead. In indigenous camps, far from colonial bustle, shamans might burn cannabis alongside copal, seeking visions as stars wheel overhead. The plant adapts its dual nature: fiber for progress, resin for reflection, mirroring the new world's own contradictions. You feel the narrative's rhythm like a gentle tide, pulling you deeper into history's haze, your breath slowing as the Americas reshape the plant's saga. You linger in the New World's humid embrace, where hemp fields stretch under colonial skis, their fibers weaving dreams of empire. But now you step into the 19th century, where cannabis dons a new mask: medicine for the masses, prescribed in apothecary bottles across Europe and America. Those sturdy colonial ropes, remember their core strength. They fade into the background as the plant's psychoactive powers take center stage, bottled and branded for a world racing toward modernity. You stand in a London pharmacy around 1840, shelves lined with amber vials, the air sharp with camphor and the faint herbal tang of cannabis tinctures. You begin with the rise of cannabis in Western medicine, driven by global exploration and scientific curiosity. The mainstream historical fact is that Sir William O'Shaughnessy, an Irish physician in India, published studies in 1839 introducing cannabis indica to European medicine, documenting its use for pain, convulsions, and insomnia in the British Medical Journal. You picture him in Calcutta, sweat beading on his brow, observing Bang's effects on patients, then distilling it into tinctures that cross oceans to treat Victorian ailments. The bottles, labeled cannabis indica, promise relief for migraines or menstrual cramps, a staple in medicine cabinets from London to New York. But here, the quirky tidbit. Some fringe accounts suggest 19th century Parisian artists like Baudelaire dabbled in hashish at the Club des Hashiskins, chasing visions for poetry. Imagine poets sprawled on velvet cushions, giggling at their own metaphors, their muse less divine, more resinous. You smile softly, the image flickering like a gas lamp as you wander cobblestone streets, where pharmacists hawk green elixirs alongside laudanum. It's a bohemian footnote, blending art with altered states, a far cry from the plant's workaday past. You stroll through bustling cities now, where doctors prescribe cannabis for everything from neuralgia to cholera spasms, its popularity soaring in an era of crude cures. You feel the cool glass of a tincture bottle in your hand, the liquid inside viscous and bitter, promising calm after a long factory shift. And with a gentle, sarcastic nudge, while today's wellness gurus push CBD for zen, these Victorians were chugging cannabis syrups just to survive Monday. Modern self-care owes them a nod, minus the corsets. As you delve deeper, you find cannabis in patent medicines like Paizo's Cure or Indian hemp asthma remedy, sold over counters with grandiose claims. It's in medical texts too. Merck's 1899 manual lists it for melancholy and muscle spasms. But overuse sparks warnings. Some doctors note confusion or lethargy in patients, echoing Pliny's ancient cautions. Historians still argue whether its widespread use was driven by genuine efficacy or placebo hype. Did it truly soothe, or was it just the era's snake oil with better branding? You pause in a New Orleans apothecary, jazz notes drifting through the window where cannabis tinctures sit beside absinthe. The plant's global journey from Indian bank to American pharmacies reflects empire's reach, seeds carried by colonial ambition. Callbacks weave in. Those Egyptian salves find echoes in these bottled brews, a thread of healing across centuries. And for a light joke, if Sherlock Holmes had swapped his pipe for cannabis, maybe he'd have solved cases by vibing with the clues. Elementary, my dear Watson, but chill. Further along, you encounter literary figures like Lusime Alcott, who might have known its effects through medical use, though her Little Women stays prim. In Europe, Queen Victoria's physician reportedly prescribed it for her menstrual pain, royalty getting relief from the same herb as dockworkers. The quirky fringe deepens. Some believe spiritualists used hashish in seances, hopping to commune with ghosts, less spirits in the sky, more spirits in the smoke, though evidence is hazy as their visions. You drift through hospital wards, where nurses administer drops for epilepsy or tetanus. The plants compounds calming convulsions in a time before barbiturates. And another joke to ease you, doctors loved cannabis for insomnia, but patients probably dreamed of pat medicine ads, cure your woes, wake up broke. The era's optimism about cannabis is tempered by early concerns, setting the stage for future bans as science sharpens its lens.